last time we are looking at Peter, and not just Peter, but of course how Jesus discipled Peter, and see if we can grab some principles and some ideas from that. Last week we just talked about what a disciple is. It's a learner, but not just any learner. It's a learner of course, Jesus, and it's a learning how to live His life in us, and learning how to live His life out here and all the things that we have going on. So that's what we want to do. So let's go today and look at this idea of asking ourselves, okay, what's involved in the process of a person beginning, to be a disciple of Jesus? And we're not trying to look for any kind of formulas. We're not trying to look for exacts or absolutes in this. What we're trying to look for is principles, some guiding ideas that could help us as we think about our discipleship with Jesus. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to think, okay, the very beginning process. If I were to tell somebody, or you were to tell somebody, if somebody asks you, how do I get started as a disciple of Jesus? There's probably all kinds of things that we might tell them. What we want to do is look into what Peter found out about getting started as a disciple of Jesus and see how that stacks up against many of the things that we are talking about. So let's just get going with it. When Peter first meets Jesus, this is in John chapter 1. It really kind of begins a little bit earlier as Andrew, and we believe the Apostle John has already met Jesus, spent the day with him. And Andrew is convinced that he's the Messiah. And look what he says. One of the two that heard John speak and followed him was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. He first found his brother Simon and said to him, "We have found the Messiah," which is translated anointed. He brought Simon to Jesus, who looked at him and said, "You are Simon, son of John. You are to be called Cephas," which is translated Peter, which we understand to be the idea of rock. So let's see if we can let's just start here. This is when Peter first meets Jesus. And I think that we can look at a couple of things here. We can look at the introduction that he had. And it seems like that if we're ever going to be a disciple of Jesus, somehow we have to be introduced to him. And so that's what happened with Peter. And so we see this Andrew is the one that introduced Simon at that time. And of course we know him more as Peter. But he is the one that introduced Peter to Jesus. And the way that we're introduced, it really makes a difference. Most of us, if you're watching this, you've probably already been introduced to Jesus. And you can look back and say, how was I introduced? Who was it that introduced me? How was I introduced to Jesus? Did I see him as a very significant aspect of my introduction? Or was he just kind of a sidebar? Hey, you need to get involved in these religious things. And, oh yeah, by the way, Jesus saves you of your sins. That will make a difference in how we move into and how we think about discipleship. Or if there was somebody like Andrew who was so excited to meet Jesus himself and to come to a belief in Jesus, and you've got somebody that is really gung-ho for Jesus and they introduce you to Jesus, well, that's a different ballgame. And what we're trying to think about is, how has my introduction affected my discipleship? And how is it when I try to introduce people to Jesus, how am I affecting their discipleship? It seems to be one of the realities for this. But also in this, we see that Peter is given a nickname. Nowhere in Jewish, or even back if you go and look in the Roman and Greek and all that, it doesn't seem that Peter was ever a name for anyone. Instead, what we're looking at is a nickname. Right? And so the nickname that, of course, he gets is Peter, Rock. Right? And usually nicknames, aren't they usually given by somebody else? Usually somebody sees something in us or sees something that we can become. It's the idea of, this is who we think you are, we kind of nickname you that, or we see something that you can become. And you can go through all the implications of what a rock is and all of that, but it seems like that Jesus is saying, I see something in you, Peter, right here, right now, and I'm going to call you from now on this rock. I'm going to call you this rock. Right? And so what we're finding out is in discipleship, this person that we're following is Jesus. And Jesus, even if you go on there in John chapter 1, he knows us way before we know him. He knows us way before we know him. And he knows us better than we know ourselves. Right? He knows everything about Peter. He already does, even though he meets him. He's going to disciple Peter, but he still knows even better than we know ourselves. And he knows more than we can ever know him. I mean, Peter is going to continue to learn. That's what we're doing, is learning. But he knows us thoroughly, and he knows exactly what we need. In other words, he knows how to bring this forth in the very best way for you and for me individually. But not only that, he knows that we can be more with him. He can make us more than we can ever make by ourselves. Peter didn't maybe see himself as a rock, and how is he ever going to become a rock? It's going to be by the forming, by the molding of the master teacher himself, Jesus. And so we have to come to see that when Jesus chooses someone, others in the crowd, others around might have said, Simon? I mean, Simon's, he's a fisherman, he's rough, he's tough, he's got a lot of things going for him, it seems, but Simon, really? Is that the one that you want to choose? He's kind of wishy-washy. I don't know what people might have said about him. But Jesus knows what he's doing. That's very significant. Because sometimes we get thinking that Jesus doesn't know what he is doing. And so we have to look and say, yes, Jesus does know what he's doing with us. That's an important aspect of discipleship. So let's pull apart this idea of him knowing, calling us, and choosing us to be a part of this. So let's go to Luke chapter 5, beginning in verse 1. Once, while Jesus was standing beside the lake of Gennesaret, and the crowd was pressing in on him and to hear the word of God, he saw 2 boats there on the shore of the lake. The fishermen had gone out of them, and they were now washing their nets. He got into one of the boats, one belonging to Simon, and he asked him to put out a little while from the shore. And he sat down and he taught the crowds from the boat. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into the deep water and let your net for a catch." But Simon answered, "Master, we have worked all night long, but have caught nothing. Yet if you say so, I will let down the nets." And when they had done this, they caught so many fish that their nets were beginning to break. And so they signaled to their partners in the other boat to come and help them. And they came and filled both boats so that they began to sink. When Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, "Go away from me, Lord, I am a sinful man." For he and all who were with him were amazed at the catch of fish that they had taken. And so also were there James and John, sons of Zebedee, who were partners with Simon. And when Jesus said to Simon, "Do not be afraid, for now on you will be catching people." And when they had brought their boats to shore, they left everything and followed him. This is the getting started after Peter had already met Jesus. And what we want to look at is what in the world was involved in this getting started as being a disciple. And we've got Jesus doing some things here, and then we see Peter doing some things here. And we'll try to apply those and look at those. That's what we're trying to do in this class, is just to, say, okay, how does this fit into my discipleship? What we see is that, first of all, Jesus involved Peter in the story before he was officially a disciple. He says, "Can I use your boat? Can I get in your boat and teach this crowd?" And Peter says, "Yeah, sure." And what Jesus did here is he involved him in his story, in Jesus' story, before Peter was had officially said, "I will accept this call," before Jesus even officially calls him to say, "Follow me." Over in John, he's just introduced, and we get the idea that, yes, he's beginning to follow, but he's hanging around Jesus is the point. And there may be a lot of hanging around before we ever move to that point. And then he confronts Peter with something. You're hanging around Jesus, And then all of a sudden you see that Jesus would do it this way, or Jesus says to do it a certain way. Hey, let down the nets. Go out a little further. Let down the nets. We fished all night. We know all of this. He is confronted with I'm kind of in the story, but who is this person? Really, who is this person? I'm letting him teach. He seems to be a good rabbi. Seems to be a teacher. Am I convinced that he is everything that he said he is? Yet, I don't know. So now you have to make that decision. So Jesus confronts him with that. Right? And then Jesus is all about this confirmation of who he is and what he can do. And so when Peter does let down the nets, it seems like a little bit of doubt there. We fished all night, but because you said, and it could be because you said yes, even though we fished all night, he could be that excited. But it could be the doubt. He turns toward that, it seems like. But Jesus does what? He confirms it. I am everything that you thought I was. So he's hanging out in the story. Jesus confronts him with, am I more than just a teacher? Am I more than just somebody that can use your boat? Lets down the nets, and there's this great catch of fish. So then we come to this unbelievable thing. He offers Peter more. Even though Peter recognizes his flaws and his failures, Jesus says, you're way more than this, and I have way more for you than this. I'm going to make you a fisherman of people. You're going to be catching people. And Peter may not understand everything that was about, but he sees what Jesus is offering. And so when we think about that, we want to say, okay, anytime we come to this idea of, are we going to be a disciple of Jesus, we have these decisions to make. And we have directions to go. Will we go in the direction of Jesus? Will we decide that he knows what he's talking about and turn our face, turn our way, turn our ideas toward him? Or will we step away at that time? Will we say, no, I can't do that? There's always decisions, always directions. And so when we're looking at discipleship here with Peter, he agreed to go along with him. And maybe that's where you are right now. Maybe somebody says, hey, will you go to church with me? And you kind of go along with it. All right? And so you're kind of involved in the story. All right? And it's kind of the beginnings of things. And that's what Peter did. And then he seems to obey even in his doubt. We fished all night. Seems to be the way that it comes across. We fished all night, but I'll do it if you say. You know? Or you come across something that Jesus says and you've been kind of hanging around, and all of a sudden you say, what am I going to do about that now that I hear Jesus wants that done? You know? And even if I doubt, even if I say, I don't know, I'm not fully in this, you know. And so if you step into that obedience, you're moving down the beginnings, the ideas of discipleship. Right? And so he humbled himself. Once he saw what Jesus had done and he saw who he was, all of a sudden he says, you're way more than I ever thought. And he humbled himself and said, I am a sinful person. And as disciples, we always come to that point of wait a minute, I am not in charge. I don't know as much, even about the things I think I know, probably as much, if not more than Jesus. I am a fisherman. I probably should know more than him about fishing, and yet you're telling me we fished all night. We hit all the hot spots. Whoa. If we will humble ourselves, we're moving into the reality of letting Jesus be the teacher and us be the learner. Right? And so then, what are we going to do? Peter turned toward Jesus. He obeyed him in his doubt. He humbled himself. And he turned toward Jesus. And so we say, what about us? What about us? This is what we're trying to look at. We're trying to take what happened in Peter's and discipleship and look at ideas and principles that we can grab hold of. And in many ways, what I've found is this is not just the beginnings, but this is kind of like part of the process. You know, it's not a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 step, but you can almost see these anytime that we further ourselves into a deeper reality of the discipleship of Jesus at the beginning or anywhere else in it. We go through this process. There will always be decisions, always be directions. Jesus will always include us in the story. many times long before we even realize it. And then boom, something will hit us. And we say, hey, are you going to be a part of this or not? And then Jesus will confirm it. He says that's exactly where we need to go. And he's always offering us more. And so we have these decisions. And will we turn toward Jesus? It can be something like, here in the church that I'm a part of, we sponsor Emmaus House. It's called. It's helping the young people transition into the real and the bigger world, the adult world, from kids, and so they train them and they get them ready, and so you can hear about that as a church, and so you're kind of in the story, you're kind of going along, but then all of a sudden you hear that Emmaus House really needs to build their own place because the place that they were renting isn't going to work and all that. And so now you're confronted with, will you participate? Will you help in that? Will you do what Jesus wants? And you say, oh, I guess so, or maybe you feel a little guilt toward it, or you're not really in it because you think this is the best thing to do, but you go ahead and give. And all of a sudden, Emmaus House gives the report that they're working to build this, and that they're blessing kids moving into the adult world. They're going and getting their degrees, and they're becoming nurses, and they're doing all that, and all of a sudden it's bigger, and Jesus is confirming that little bit of money that you gave is going a long, long way, and he's offering you more than you ever thought you could get. That's kind of the idea that we're talking about when we talk about discipleship. So what's involved in this? It's going to be those things. And it's not just at the beginnings. It's the beginnings of any new step, any furtherance into discipleship. You're going to have Jesus kind of pulling us into the story, and then he confronts us with something to step into the story. And he knows that choosing us is the right thing. He knows that asking us to do this is what needs to be done. And so then he confirms. He's always confirming. He's always doing that. And he's always offering us more. We have those decisions and directions. Right? Discipleship with Peter. We're going to keep moving on and see about the calling and what Peter went into and what the ideas are behind Jesus. I hope this is helpful. I hope it can be a blessing. I hope that we all continue down the path of discipleship with Jesus.